Dana White is an extremely polarizing character within the UFC/MMA world. While many people love him, many people also hate him these days. Today I want to go over some of the positives Dana White has done for the UFC and some of the negatives, as well as have a little discussion on whether or not Dana's time as president of the company is coming to an end. First of all, let's talk about all the good things Dana White's done for the UFC, because there are a lot of them. Number one, Dana White effectively turned the UFC into what it is today. Without Dana White, the UFC probably wouldn't even be a thing anymore. In 2001, Dana White actually helped broker the deal that had the UFC be sold to the Fertitta brothers for $2 million, and after that, he was named president of the UFC. In 2005, Dana White and the UFC introduced the Ultimate Fighter Season 1. Dana pushed very hard to get it aired on Spike TV. The finale of that season, Griffin versus Bonner, is actually credited with saving the UFC. It was an all-out war for 3 rounds. Griffin did end up getting the win, but nonetheless, both fighters definitely contributed to what the UFC is today. This fight effectively tripled the popularity of the UFC. Shortly after, in 2006 at UFC 66, Chuck Liddell versus Tito Ortiz 2 was the first fight to hit 1 million pay-per-view buys. Dana White also spent many years trying to legalize MMA in key states such as New York, which did take a while. It was not officially legalized until 2016. In 2007, the UFC signed their deal with Fox, which was essentially their mainstream breakthrough, and Dana White was a big part of that. And in 2016, the UFC sold to WME IMG, which is now known as Endeavor, for $4.025 billion. Definitely a big increase from the $2 million that the Fertitta brothers originally purchased it for. And in 2019, he would help the UFC sign a deal with ESPN Plus worth over $1 billion for the streaming rights. And recently, as I'm recording this, Dana White did announce that the UFC is now signed with Paramount Plus, and it will be the exclusive home of pay-per-views. Well, actually, no pay-per-views anymore. That is what we're hearing. There will be no more pay-per-views, and you will just need a subscription to watch the UFC. This deal is worth $7.7 billion. It's a 7-year deal, $1.1 billion a year. Absolutely bonkers. Now, let's go ahead and talk about some negatives from Dana. From the beginning, Dana White has been criticized for his lack of payment to fighters. Now, one thing I want to say about this is, yes, I do believe some contracts in the UFC are lower than perhaps they should be. However, I do believe that you shouldn't have every fighter making bank, because there will be no incentive to be better. That being said, I don't think people going out there and essentially risking their lives deserve just 12-12 to show and win. I do think we can do better than that, but I understand why they're not making $100,000, say. And also, to give Dana credit, it is reported that he does give bonuses to people that aren't officially clarified and not officially known. So as far as we know, he does give bonuses to his fighters that we just don't really know exact figures of. We also have heard of him helping his fighters through medical things, so we can at least appreciate that about Dana. As of right now, fighters typically only earn between 15 and 20% of the UFC's annual revenue. Now, this is for all fighters combined, whereas many sports are closer to the 40s and 50s percentage-wise in terms of overall revenue. So many people do think that the UFC should pay their fighters a closer to 50% split of all revenue, which would effectively make every fighter's contract significantly bigger and would help many people not have to fight so often, or potentially just be able to afford different health cares and surgeries. You know, a lot of things are involved in fighting in the UFC. A lot of people get injured. It's a costly sport. In 2021, he did ignore Francis Ngannou after he won his belt and didn't wrap it around him. Now, many people don't know if this was, on purpose. Dana White himself says it wasn't. Other people feel like it may have been. The UFC later on lowballed Francis Ngannou, who was basically the only exciting heavyweight at the time. And Francis Ngannou ended up leaving the UFC. Fighters have claimed that they have been punished for criticizing the UFC in public. Now, whether or not this is true, again, this is just a claim, I cannot say, but if several people are saying it, we can assume that there may be some truth to it. Now, how much are they punished, and is it really a punishment, or is it just the UFC saying, hey, stop criticizing us? No way to know for sure. Only select info about payment is actually public. Dana White is known to give, as I said before, discretionary bonuses where we don't really have figures, and in many states, we don't even know what fighters are getting paid each fight. We don't really know what their contracts are exactly. However, in some states and in some commissions, after a fight, they do always put out what a fighter made. That doesn't always include discretionary bonuses again, though. So basically, people want more transparency in the payment as well as more payment overall to fighters. Dana White has been accused over and over again of favoring hype-based fighters instead of giving them fights or, bonuses and things of that nature based on merit. For example, many people didn't think that Conor McGregor deserved his fight against Khabib after his layoff fighting Floyd Mayweather. Brock Lesnar was rushed to the top of the heavyweight division rather quickly. Sean O'Malley as well, and the whole debacle with him fighting Aljamain Sterling and Aljamain Sterling having to make a relatively quick come around because the UFC made him. Now, despite all of this, my actual biggest problem with Dana White personally is his lack of focus and promotion on the UFC as a whole. I feel like he is slowly being disconnected, and he is favoring things like boxing, which he is working with the Saudis and is basically promoting Canelo versus Crawford, as well as Power Slap. I'm going to be honest, I don't care about Power Slap. I don't want to hear about Power Slap. Just talk about the UFC, please. And also, he just recently said they still might do some pay-per-views in 2026. This has many people calling him greedy, as you're basically telling us, you just got $7 billion for this to be on a streaming service, and now you might still do pay-per-views every once in a while? Ridiculous! Now, whether or not that is true, only time will tell, but these are the positives and negatives from Dana White. Now, I will end this video by saying that because of what Dana White has done for the UFC, I believe he is a net positive. I don't think it's necessarily time for him to leave. However, I do think maybe somebody else should take over the promotional aspect of the UFC, as I just feel like Dana has so much on his plate and so many other endeavors that he's focused on right now that maybe it's time for him to take a step back from that aspect. As for him and Hunter Campbell running things behind the scenes, it appears to be going great. They're making money. Not too much to complain about. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next video. Peace.